Anthony Porter may be the luckiest man on earth. He was convicted of a grisly murder and his clock on death row was ticking. Porter was just 48 hours away from being executed.
Asked me what I wanted for my last meal. Imagine for my coffin. It was awful.
Then somebody else confesses. It's the subject of Murder in the Park, Showtime's sensational tale of a single-minded pursuit of justice that goes barreling off the rails. TV and film producer Sean Reck combed through reams of court docs and hours of testimony to reveal the untold truth of this explosive story. And even for the veteran true crime producer, he was blown away by what he found.
This story involves a lot of people who aren't who they say they are. The people who portrayed themselves as heroes were the bad guys in this story.
It starts with a gruesome killing that sadly comes with the territory of Southside Chicago. On a sweltering summer night, dozens of kids hop the fences of Washington Park, cooling off in the swimming pool. Suddenly, the bursts of laughter turn to screams of terror. Shots ring out in the bleachers above the pool. And two young people with plans to get married, Jerry Hillard and Marilyn Green, are gunned down in cold blood. Residents in this crime-riddled area have seen it all, but this shocking murder truly strikes too close to home.
It hurt me so bad till I can't cry no more. I ain't cried no more since she got killed.
Even before the sun rises that morning, police pull out all the stops to solve the brutal crime.
I came to work at approximately 20 after 4. My supervising sergeant called me in and he said, "Chuck, you and Dennis are gonna pick up the double from Washington Park last night."
The detectives find a necklace at the scene. It looks like a robbery gone wrong. Marilyn is shot through the hand and neck. Jerry is shot twice in the head. The lifeless victims could never name their killer, but there are other witnesses, lots of them. William Taylor and Henry Williams tell cops that the night of the killing, they hopped the fence to take a dip in Washington Park pool. Henry is drying off when a man he knows from the neighborhood approaches, and it sends a shiver up his spine. It's Anthony Porter, a local thug who's well known for crimes ranging from petty theft and kicking dogs to armed robbery and vicious assaults.
He was a terrified man back then. You say that name back then, Anthony Porter, everybody ran. He was feared.
Porter presses cold steel to Williams's head and digs through his pockets, coming within a hair trigger of blowing his head off for a mere $2. When Henry's friend William gets out of the pool a few minutes later, he hears the sharp crack of gunfire. The shooter takes off, and there's no mistaking who it is.
Who did you see?
Tony Porter.
More and more witnesses from that terrifying night at the pool point the finger at the same man.
All of a sudden you just see, pow, pow.
Who did you see?
I saw Tony Porter and I saw him do it.
I seen Anthony Porter right there in the bleachers. He shot him and killed him and he ran.
It has all the appearances of an open and shut case.
The police investigated the case and determined, through their investigation that Anthony Porter had committed the crime. He was charged, he went to trial, pled not guilty, was found guilty, and was given the death penalty.
For most criminals on death row, that's where the story ends. And it almost did for Anthony Porter.
Anthony Porter was 48 hours from execution. He filled out the meal card for his final meal and was measured for a state-issued coffin.
It seems like the end of the line for the doomed inmate, but at the last possible minute, this story takes an incredible twist.
A journalism class at Northwestern University led by Dr. David Protes took on this case to try and free Anthony Porter and said that he was actually innocent. So they set out to prove that he was innocent, even go as far as to prove who had really committed this crime.
Protest gathers a team of star students and gives this Junior Justice League one purpose: find a way to get Anthony Porter out of jail. The team gets right to work and uncovers another eyewitness that no one's ever heard of. and she implicates someone else.
And do you realize who shot them?
He did, because he was the only one standing there.
And he is?
Story Simon.
They did their version of an investigation, and lo and behold, they solved the case and found the real killer. His name was Story Simon, or so they said.
Incredibly, the doctor and his students produce a videotaped confession.
Before I knew anything, I just pulled it up and started shooting.
The confession is a bombshell. Protest and his team go straight to the 6 o'clock news.
It was on the national news nightly for weeks.
The professor and his students are hailed as heroes.
Just such an amazing story. These 4 student sleuths went out and solved this case like an episode of Scooby-Doo.
The media attention throws Chicago's entire criminal justice system into a tailspin.
After Porter's release, there was a moratorium placed on the death penalty by the governor.
For too long, the prosecutors in Cook County put a lot of people on death row and in prison, and they were wrongfully convicted and sent there.
My first reaction was, oh my God, don't tell me we almost put an innocent man to death. What did I do wrong? I prided myself in conducting good investigations. It just blew me away.
But as it turns out, the veteran cop's instincts were right.
While it seemed to the public that Story Simon confessed to this crime and these people saved someone's life, when everyone dug in, a very, very different story emerged.
Through the Northwestern investigation, the guilty guy, Story Simon, was put in prison, and the innocent guy, Anthony Porter, was released. There was one problem, though. Anthony Porter killed those 2 people.
Death row inmate Anthony Porter is so close to execution, he's literally choosing his last meal. But at the last minute, a heart-stopping revelation. A professor from Northwestern and his students find evidence that clears Porter's name. They even get a videotaped confession from the guy they say committed the crime.
I'm free, I'm my body.
It's a bombshell that springs one man from prison and puts another in his place.
So justice is served. The bad guy goes to prison, the good guy gets out, right? Wrong.
Just when it seems this story has a happy ending, it takes another unbelievable turn into a real-life murder mystery. Every unbelievable detail playing out on a Showtime documentary titled A Murder in the Park.
Nothing was what it seemed. That's what was so interesting about this case.
University professor Dr. David Protest is at the center of the scandal and may have masterminded the whole scheme. But why? At the time, Protest leads Northwestern University's Innocence Project. Their mission? Freeing wrongfully convicted men from death row. Admirable, yes, but the good doctor takes his crusade too far.
The ends to him justify the means. Anything to end the death penalty. And here they're saving a man's life who's 2 days away. It's a very dramatic story.
Protest thinks he's got another suspect in the Porter murder case, an acquaintance of one of the victims, Story Simon. It's a sketchy theory at best. There's no evidence and no witnesses, but the media-savvy doctor knows that he might be able to prove this case on the 6 o'clock news.
The popular media narrative at the time is that Porter was railroaded. It was just a rubber stamp prosecution. They did an awful lot of talking. They would have walked in front of a wedding photographer to tell this story.
And a sensational story might be all Protest needs to get a man off death row. He puts together a team of photogenic star students to reinvestigate the crime.
David Protest didn't really use the students for this investigation. They helped a little, and you could see that they did a little bit of background work.
But the real dirty work of building a new case gets done behind the scenes.
What he really did was he hired a private investigator named Paul Cialino. He's a high-profile, successful private investigator from the Chicago area, involved with a lot of big cases.
Protest hires the Bulldog PI to build a case around Protest's prime suspect, Story Simon. It's something that this rough-and-tumble investigator does very, very well. Cialino starts by coercing a witness into changing their testimony.
I don't know how that went down, but they had basically convinced me that I didn't see him shoot anybody. And I said, well, maybe I did make a mistake, but I don't think I did. But I said, okay, if this is the way they want to play this, I'll play the game, just to get them out of my hair.
Ciolino next promises Alstory Simon's ex-wife that he'll help to get her nephew and son out of jail if she'll lie, and point the finger at her former husband.
And do you realize who shot them?
He did, because he was the only one standing there.
And he is?
Alstory Simon.
And in the most unbelievable dirty trick of all, he pressures and bullies Alstory Simon into confessing to a murder he didn't commit. Doing that required a setup right out of a Hollywood movie.
I think what they did to Alstory Simon was despicable.
When I opened the door, here's Paul Ciolino and Arnold Reed.
These men burst into his home, impersonating police officers. They had fake badges, guns drawn, and they had these guns, badges, a camera, and a tripod. They pushed him onto his couch. They said, "We know you did this." He said, "What are you talking about?"
He tells me, "We know you did these murders. You're going down for these murders, and there's nothing you're gonna be able to do about it. You better look at the evidence." He popped this tape in, and here's this Afro-American male person up there on this tape claiming that he was at Washington Park and actually saw me shoot and kill Marilyn Green and Jerry Hillard.
It turns out that person was an actor, hired by Paul Ciolino and scripted by Paul Ciolino. And they even admitted they used an actor, and their excuse was, well, the police do stuff like this all the time, so it was okay.
But if a frightened Simon had any lingering doubts about giving a false confession, Ciolino had one final sucker punch at his disposal.
He tells me, "I want you to see something." He goes to the TV that I had on. It showed my ex-wife, Inez, accusing me of murder and being with me and both observed me shoot and kill these people.
And do you realize who shot them?
He did, because he was the only one standing there.
And at that moment, he thought, it doesn't matter if I did it or not. My goose is cooked. These people are out to set me up, and they've set me up. And everyone's going to believe them, and I'm going to get the death penalty in Illinois. And in his mind, he was making the smartest long-term decision for himself.
Before I knew anything, I just pulled it up and started shooting.
With the case closing tape in hand, protest goes straight to the news. In the ensuing media circus, Anthony Porter is released from death row.
They let Porter go because the climate at that time was so that the police officers must have done wrong.
And Alstory Simon, a man who had nothing to do with the crime, is sentenced to 37 years in prison.
David Protest was a trusted source for Chicago journalists, and they didn't bother to check his work, and they should have. To him, he was willing to do whatever it took, even if it meant railroading an innocent man.
Luckily, the story takes one more twist, and thankfully, a reopening of the case against Alstory Simon.
The investigation of this case has been so deeply corroded and corrupted that we can no longer maintain the legitimacy of this conviction.
After 15 long years in prison, Alstory Simon gets a new day in court, and he is also set free.
What's next? Whatever the Lord has in store for me.
It's great that Alstory Simon finally received justice, but he lost a lot of what he had health-wise while he was incarcerated. So he's just trying to rebuild his life, and I hope he gets over that hump.
But what about the other guys in this case?
Everybody from the Northwestern team refused to be a part of our film. David Protest, Paul Ciolino, and all of the students. Nobody would sit for the film.
Dr. David Protest is fired from Northwestern University. Protest disputes the version of events depicted in the film. In a blog for the Huffington Post Chicago, David Protest denies the allegations, saying, quote, "Simon was charged with murder. That's when he could have said, 'I'm innocent, I was tricked into confessing.' But he didn't do it."
The heroes in this case weren't heroes at all. First of all, the kids were unwitting accomplices to a fraud. Those students didn't know that this evidence is being manufactured by a private investigator and Dr. Protest.
That private investigator, Paul Ciolino, told our affiliate WGN, quote, "Mr. Simon confessed to a Milwaukee TV reporter, his own lawyer, and others since he confessed to me. You explain that." And Anthony Porter? He can't be charged again for the same crime because of the law against double jeopardy. Anthony Porter is a free man.
I'm free, I'm my body.
People recognize you?
Oh yeah, people recognize me all the time though, you know. They say they go Mr. Porter, you know, like Anthony Porter. You know, that's the man they almost killed.